not going to take up too much time. If you don't know Maegan and Peter, then make sure you go read their bios that we have on the page later after this. But I want to give them the most time to talk, and I don't want you guys listening to me. The one thing I will say, we are giving away their new book at some point during this webinar. So if you are participating in the chat, I might pluck a great comment and reply to you and let you know that you are getting our giveaway, and then just reply to any of the emails that you've gotten from us and tell us that you were the winner. I'll write down your name, but you got to give us your address to send it to. That's what I need. So I am going to go off screen, but I will be here if you guys need anything, and I'm going to be taking lots of notes like everybody else. So I'm going to turn it over to Peter and Maegan. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Christina.
Thank you.
Morning, everybody. Maegan, where are you this morning?
So I am in a very warm Saskatchewan, and by warm I mean I think it's a bit above zero, maybe, or potentially just below. But for the last month, it's been about -46. So this is wonderfully warm. Where in the world is Peter?
Maegan speaking in Celsius there. So when she says above zero, she means just above freezing.
Yeah, sorry for my American friends. Although I did see several people in the chat from Saskatchewan, so shout out to those people. What about you? Where are you from?
I'm in San Diego. I'm participating in the CPM conference today, so this is a good start to the day. And it is well above freezing here.
It's well above freezing. Ugh, yeah. Bragging about it, obviously. Should we?
Yeah, let's jump into it.
Okay, so at the turn of the century, what happened, Peter?
This is this is feeling like a very long time ago now. But many people who know BTC know a little bit about how this story started. But just to recap, I was invited into a classroom, and it was a middle school classroom. And the teacher wanted me to help her implement problem solving in her classroom. And what she really wanted from me was just for me to provide some tasks. And I provided a task. I gave her a task that I had used myself with kids. I had used in workshops. This was a good task. I knew this task was going to work. It's a Lewis Carroll problem, which I thought that would work well with this particular teacher because she was also into the arts. And it was this classic task of if 6 cats can kill 6 rats in 6 minutes, how many cats are needed to kill like 100 rats in 50 minutes? And this is a task that, you know, it's got everything that middle school kids care about, right? It's got cats and rats and a bit of, you know, gore.
Violence is always good.
And I gave this task, and it is like, if you've never done this task, it's a thinker, right? And how did it go?
Yeah, so how
did it go? Was a disaster, right? Like immediately, every kid had their hand up. Some kids had 2 hands up. And the teacher, I was not allowed to participate. I was only allowed to watch. But the teacher was running around the room trying to help these kids get going. And you know, it was just an unmitigated disaster. And Jane, that was the name of the teacher, to her credit, came up at the end of that and said, give me another task. And I gave her another task, another good one, and it went even worse. And then she asked for a third one, and it was the worst of all. And there was a whole bunch of things that came out of that work. And that was really the impetus to this building thinking classroom work that I was doing. But one of the things that it really revealed to me in that moment was that the task is not enough, right? Like at that time of my work, and I was doing a lot of work in problem solving and creativity at that time, I started to realize that the task was not enough. And I thought up until that point that that's all we needed, was we just needed good tasks. And the right task will solve all problems. And I think that's the most important thing that came out of that in that moment. You know, and then the impetus to build thinking classrooms. But just coming back to this idea, you know, I travel the world, and almost everywhere I go, I encounter at least one project that groups of people are working on finding or designing tasks. And I always tell them the same. That's great. We do need good tasks, but the task is not enough.
Which I will say, this is funny because we literally wrote a task book. And
Yeah, I
here
know.
it's like my Catholic going, the task is not enough, guys. We know we haven't like wrote this, but it's so true, right? And I feel like we just know that the task is not enough. You need to have so many like micro moves to make sure
Yeah.
good tasks become great, right? And so the question becomes, how do we make good tasks better? And there's really four ways, right? Like
Yeah.
we look
And
at
we
it
thought a
through,
lot about this, and this is embedded within the book, right?
yeah. And the design, which is really a big part of the book, I would say, is that idea of design and how we, so this would be before you even give the task to the kids, how, like, what are the different ways we can design tasks better?
Yeah.
And how we launch it, obviously, right? The body, right? What
Yeah.
happens
Which is
during?
that time where the kids are at the whiteboards working on the task.
Yeah. And then obviously we can close tasks to make them, to make good tasks better. So,
And we're going to talk a lot about that today. Hopefully, we have lots of time left over to talk about that, but to never, ever underestimate the importance of that close, right?
yes,
And if we don't have time to emphasize that later, I just want to emphasize it now. The close is vital
it
for
has to
this
happen
going.
every
Yep.
time.
Yep.
Yes.
So
Even
let's
if
get
it's like
into it. Let's talk
5
about the
minutes.
design.
So one way is slicing into a task. What's that, Peter?
Okay. So as Maegan said, like one of the things that I say all the time is that the world doesn't need more tasks. There are tons of great tasks out there. For example, the chicken nugget task, right? Like this made the circuit a few years ago, where it was this task that everybody seemed to be working on. This, chicken nuggets come in packs of 6, 9, and
20?
20. And what's the
Sorry.
largest number of chicken nuggets you cannot buy when they only come in packs of 6, 9, and 20? And this is a great task. It really is a great task. But it's, I've used this task with kids. This is not a great first task, right?
Yeah.
So I started to work really hard on trying to figure out, well, if this is a task I want to get to, what is the first question that I ask the kids? And that led to me developing this task around a target, which is that there's a target, and this target has only the bullseye, which is the red. Let's call it the red, is worth 3 points, and the white is worth 2 points. The blue is worth no points. You have unlimited darts. What scores can't you get? And in fact, what is the highest score you can't get? And just starting with that, a target that has a ring worth 3 and a ring worth 2 and unlimited darts. And then it's like, well, now it's 2 and 5. Now it's 2 and 7. Now it's 2 and 11. And it's 3 and 5. And then 3 and 7 and 3, 11. And like building up and building up, just focusing on 2 rings where you can really control the numbers. And then building up to this idea that, well, what if we have 3 rings? And what if the numbers get to 6, 9, and 20? And because the context of chicken nuggets is great, but it doesn't allow us to really vary the task that much, because everybody knows that chicken nuggets don't really come in packs of 2 or 3, because that would be a ridiculously small number of chicken nuggets.
So small. Not even
Yeah.
children would love. Yeah.
So this idea of thin slicing into a task is really valuable. And like the carnival conundrum is another example of that. So Maegan, why don't you take us into that one?
Yeah. Well, so this was a task that is in our green book, but this came from Enrich, and essentially what this first task wanted you to do was to place the numbers 1 to 5 in the shape of the V, so that both arms would have the same sum. However, this task very quickly wanted people to make some sort of generalization or some sort of conjecture right away. And as everyone knows, I work primarily with K-5 teachers, and we can't be having that happening like right away. So then when we were thinking about ways to slice into this task, we did the numbers 1 to 5, and then we did 3 to 7, and then we just kept on giving them different numbers so that they would find that generalization over time instead of putting all of that information at the very beginning, which the students weren't quite ready for. So once again, we
And
want them,
having that generalization come out of their
yeah,
experiences through that thin slicing rather than saying generalize right up front.
Exactly. And I think this is something specifically with like vocabulary too. We tend to front like load that, but we really need to give students different experiences with these tasks and these wording and these generalizations so that when they make them, they make sense to them. Because I think sometimes we just do it a bit too soon.
Yeah. And Farmer John, other example, right? In the orange book, this is a task. It's right out of the orange book. You know, the farmer has pigs and chickens. He sees he has 22 legs. How many pigs and how many chickens, right? And this, you can use this task for a lot of different subjects. And this is a great task for getting into linear relations. That's awesome if I'm using it with grade 7s or 8s, maybe grade 6s. But if I want to use this task with grade 1s and grade 2s, this is not the task to start with. I need to thin slice my way into this task. And the way we thin slice our way into it is like, okay, I have cows and I have ducks. How many legs does a cow have? And like, that's the question that I'm asking the kids when we're in that launch. And then how many legs does a duck have? Right. And then, well, I have two cows and two ducks. How many legs do I have? And that is the right first task for a grade 1 student to start engaging in, right? The 22 legs will come in the sequence. That's our goal to get there, but that's not where we start. And there's one other little nuance here that I want to draw attention to. The image showed chickens and pigs. Well, I did this task in Hawaii. Hawaii has a huge wild chicken problem. There are chicks running around everywhere. So when I introduced this task and I'm like, so I live on a farm, and on this farm we have pigs and chickens. And the kids were like, why would you have chickens on a farm? They just didn't get this idea that chickens are everywhere. Why would you even bother having these on a farm? So we had to change the task to ducks and cows.
Yeah, 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 and like I think I've tried the first task with my kindergartners, and I think I did like I think I said I have six like legs. How many? But I will tell you like, and I did that several times with different kindergarten like groups, and every single time it was just a big struggle. And
Yeah.
this just makes it much easier for students to actually be successful.
Yeah. And to start that thinking process, right? So
Yes.
tell us about musical fractions, because
Okay.
this one actually came from a story with you and your son.
Oh yeah, so this is what happened. So I'm from Saskatchewan, so clearly I must love country music. I do. So this is a country song, and I was listening to some music with my son, and he wanted to know like how far into the Jacob, my 7-year-old now, he was 5 at the time. He like kept on wanting to know how far into the song we were, and so then I was like, oh, we are about half, we're a quarter, 2/3, whatever. And then finally he said, yeah, but like are we but then he wanted to know, are we exactly 1/2? Are we actually 2/3? All of that stuff. So I came up with this task. And this is funny too, because to me, it was so obvious. And I gave this to be like, oh, obviously kids will understand, 1 minute 30 is like half of 3 minutes. And then 9 is half of, and I was thinking, I'm a genius. I've been able to give this to these like kids, and this will be no problem at all. Oh boy, was I horribly wrong. First of all, I didn't realize kids don't understand time that well, and seconds and minutes, and how there's conversions within this task, which makes this really difficult. And people maybe who are adults can look at this and say, oh yeah, 1/2. Children were not ready for that. And it was kind of like my cats and rats like task, because it kind of crashed and burned. And kids were struggling pretty.
But
They were
it
doing
is a
that.
great task. It's
It is
just
a
not
great
the
task.
right first task.
So this is the right first task.
Yes.
And this is right. Number one, because I found that if I put the names of the songs, kids had too many like opinions about these songs. And I was like, you need to relax, children.
Yeah.
But also because this really helps them understand that, oh, 30 seconds is half of 1 minute.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't saying 60, it was saying 1 minute. And some kids didn't really even understand that. So this is a good first task because they do get it, but and this is part of that slicing into tasks, is that kids need to be like learning different things throughout every single slice in order to be successful when things get really hard. And this
And
is
part of this is that there are things here for them to learn and to start thinking about, right? With the Farmer John problem, it's to start to think about how many legs rather than how many animals, which is what their instinct is to go to. So we got to get them focused on the legs, and then we can flip the script. And now I have to tell you how many legs, how many animals, right? And here it's this idea, the number of seconds in a minute, how we think about fractions in relation to time and things like that. And it's the other part is that it's not just that there are things to learn. There is a huge advantage to having the kids start to feel successful, right?
yes.
Because my research is showing that if we want students to enter into that state of productive struggle, they have to have some early success, right? The early success.
Little wins, right?
So when they hit that task that is challenging, that cats and rats, the 20 the chicken nugget problem, when they do hit that one where perseverance is really needed and they need to enter into a state of productive struggle, having those early successes allows them to enter into that state of productive struggle.
Oh, more money, more problems. Do you want me
Yeah,
to do this or do you want to do this?
you can talk about this one.
So this was another one because you'll see my son's name is in there, Jakester. It's my little boy. So once again, I wanted to start off with, yeah, how much money does Jakester have if he has 7 dimes and 6 nickels? Okay, and just FYI, I gave this to grade 1 students, so fun fact, they a lot of them don't understand how much dimes and nickels are worth. So another thing where a lot of my assumptions based on what my knowledge is kind of started to bite me in the butt a little bit here. And so in turn, so once again, great task, super awesome, wonderful. But we should probably start here.
Yeah.
Where wait, he has 3 nickels, and now we are like, I'm only focusing on one type of currency, but also but something like nickels is familiar, right? 5, 10, 15. Kids learned to skip count by 5s and 10s quickly, which is great, but I wanted them to add like 5 nickels and 7 like dimes is nuts. Like that's a lot here. This is a lot more I guess concrete, but however, also kind of gets them into understanding how this task will work further on.
But it also gives them a representation that they can start to
Mhm.
use as the task gets more challenging and more challenging. Not that they're going to use it for sure, but it allows them access to representation to help them think through the task.
Yes, which I would say is like when we are like doing workshops for adults, it's different because we don't really need to give them that structure or that foundation, but especially whenever we are doing things with this K to 5 realm, it like yeah, I would say it's so important to just give them something to fall back on concretely, pictorially, something that is just a constant throughout the task.
Yeah. And finally, the tax collector. Now, the tax collector is a task that I have in the Orange Book. And what we have to understand about the tax collector is that, this is how it's portrayed in the Orange Book. This was not how I encountered this task. The first version of the task that I saw was you have 48 checks. And here are the rules. What is the most that you can get? And it's like, okay, 48. That's a good task, but that's not the place to start. We had to dial it back a bit. How do I thin slice my way into this? How do I create a context where the kids can come to understand the task, right? We've talked about this idea that when we thin slice in, there's things that kids can learn. How many seconds in a minute? There are representations we can give them. The idea around coins. It allows them to be successful and build up that repertoire of successes that helps them launch into a productive struggle. But also, it just gives them a space to play in so that they can come to understand what the task is actually asking, right? And so by thin slicing in, they can actually play with this smaller set of checks.
Oh, yeah.
Or in this case, envelopes. All right, let's get on to thin slicing out of a task.
Yeah. And so yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
So sometimes the task is great. However, it's just too difficult to like start with. But in the same way, we have tasks where it is a great starting point, but we don't know where it's going to go from here.
Yeah.
So that's what we really need to think about, is, okay, so this is task 1. What is task 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, da, 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 da.
And a great example of this is next door numbers, which is a task that I stumbled across a few years ago. It's a great task, right? You got to place the numbers from 1 to 10 in this boxes so that numbers that are next to each other on the number line are not next to each other in this configuration. Great task. The kids really start thinking about it. But then what, right? Like
Yeah.
it's a
Once
great,
they've solved
often
it.
these tasks are used as bell ringers or warm-ups because they're one-offs. But if I want to use it progressively, I need to go somewhere from here. So what's the next configuration going to look like, right? So developing that progression. So it's, yeah, we got a great starting point. What comes next?
Absolutely. Or the like a task in the book that is called like oddly even. So this one is, okay, like what is the sum of like blank and blank, where we know we like want to get to on a like an even sum. Once again, great task, but very, very like low floor. So we need to think about, okay, what would be the final like one, which is, okay, giving these two numbers or giving what the sum would be, what kinds of numbers could like add to this sum. And this is cool too, because this is really the culmination of what they should have been like learning throughout the task. Is, okay, so you've been adding 2 like evens and 2 like odds, and then an even and an odd. Now we are going to give you just a number. What could have sum to that?
Yeah. And that's that pushing into that deeper sense of understanding and deeper sense of knowledge, right? Another example of one of these one-off sort of bell ringer type activities was the colored shapes, which is, here's some shapes and you're going to be given some clues and you got to figure out what color each shape is. That's great. The kids really love it. They engage with it, but then what? So it's like, okay, so we need more sets of clues. So there's this idea that what will be the progression that we come out of this, and how can we actually make these clues more challenging? And if you compare the two sets, if you go back one, Megan, this one has 6 clues for 6 shapes. Well, the next set, it's only 4 clues, and it's enough to get you to color all the shapes, but this makes it harder.
Yeah.
There's more subtlety to it. So it's that slicing out of the task, where slicing in is, what is an easy way to start and how do we increase the complexity until we get to the task that we want to get to? This one is, we have a great task. How do we now come out of it by creating more and more challenging tasks? And we see that in each of these ones.
Absolutely. So now this is a funny thing that I feel like we've just started to really talk about more and more too, which is this like an idea of, so sometimes tasks can be like thick and thin, can't they, Peter? Like
Yeah.
it's a weird thing how like you can design something to kind of like be in this like an in-between space, which I'm loving, I think.
Or even if you're trying to design it so that it just nicely, gradually progresses very thinly, there are moments where you just can't avoid it being a bigger leap. And a nice example of this is when we use like open middle tasks.
Yeah. And I would find this task in particular, I have found has been a thick, thin slice type of thing. So this would be the first task, like, which is, okay, or like using the digits 1 to 9, place these to make the largest sum. Now, if you have kids who are still learning about place value, this will be a thick slice for them because they'll just start throwing in numbers anywhere, right? But once they figure that out, and then you then ask them to find the smallest, that would be a thin slice, because once you kind of get it, it's just thin, right?
Yeah. Because it's really just the same thinking. And now the
But
task
reversed.
is, it's not really that much
Yeah.
harder. In fact, it might not even
However,
be harder at all.
true.
But
However,
then,
you do this,
yeah,
and now this is back to being thick, because this is the same like an outcome, right? We're still just like I'm adding 2-digit numbers, but now it is slightly more difficult, and there's some constraints. So once again, thin, thick.
yeah,
And that's a cool piece to these like open middle ones. when we string them together properly, we get like this cool balance of like deeper thoughts and these other
Yeah.
things.
But there's other ways to do it as well. Go back to that open middle.
Oh.
There is like thin is find the largest. Thin is also find the smallest, but then another thick is try to get this number as close to 80 as possible.
Yes, for sure. Yeah.
Right.
Targets.
So varying the constraints can absolutely that same sort of thin, thick effect.
Absolutely.
And we see this within and across types, right? Like, and we talk about this in the Green Book, but this idea that, okay, if we're going to add 2-digit numbers, for example, adding 2-digit numbers without regrouping is a type of task, right? And they can get progressively harder just by the magnitude of the numbers. But then all of a sudden, when we move to adding 2-digit numbers where there's regrouping the ones into tens, that is a different type of task. And there is a thick slice between the first type and the second type. We can't avoid it. It's going to get more challenging, right? But then adding, then we can add a whole bunch of numbers together where we're only regrouping around the ones. Again, that's just thin slices. But then all of a sudden, we move to type 3, and type 3 is maybe we're regrouping ones and tens, right? So there's a progression there that is unavoidable. It's going to get more challenging.
Mhm. Yeah, and like really this whole like concept is just like you there is a like way to have kids be like running or I'm digging. So running is okay, the like numbers get more and more difficult and we start to regroup. But like I'm digging is what are the different questions you want to ask students like that will further their conceptual knowledge. And so when we give a like target, that's digging. And we are digging down versus if we are making it into two different types of regrouping, that might be more considered to be a like running. And this is a good example. So in this task, this is a task I did with my kinders a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago. And I had them sort these shapes, and I didn't say by like how. So some did it by color, and some did it by shape. And then, but then based on what they were doing, they would be like I'm either running or digging. So some students I would like I'm just have them like I'm add up like I'm all of them or subtract, or some of them I thought it would be cool to do some digging. And so with one group, I took out all of those off of the like board, put them into a like bucket, and then said, I will be picking out 3. Which shapes which shapes do you think this will be? And that's digging, right? And that's them thinking about it beyond just, oh, this one has more.
And we don't need to be digging for every group, right?
No.
It's just the groups, and that allows for that differentiation, right? And we're digging into like depth of knowledge that we can think of. All right, we got to pick up the pace here a little bit.
Too much talking. All right, the launch.
Let's get into the launch. So now we're launching, right? And it's okay. So we have the task. Now, how do we get it to the students? And I would say that one of the most important principles of this, and this very much goes into this idea of thin slicing into the task, is using this metaphor that comes from a friend of ours, Jared Sliger, about this idea that we want to back the train up into the station as far as necessary to get all our students onto the train. And then we're going to leave the station. Now my job as a teacher is just to keep everybody on the train, which is actually a lot better to do than pulling out of the station with 2 kids in the snack bar, 3 in the bathroom, and 4 standing on the wrong platform. Because then I have 2/3 of my kids on the train and 1/3 of my kids standing back at the station going, I don't know what happened. What do we do now? Right? It's a lot better if we could just get everybody onto the train. But there's a nuance that comes from this. And that nuance is that in order for me to get everybody onto the train, about 1/3 of my students have to think that the first task is too easy.
Really? Just this?
Yeah.
Okay.
If 1/3 think that it's too easy, then everybody's on the train. But right? So it's like you need to err on that side. Like the challenge will come, right? And this is one of the big misnomers around building thinking classrooms, that the first task has to be the super thinker. No, let's get them on the train. Let's get the train out of the station. Let's get down the track a bit. And as we're going down the track, everybody's going to meet challenge.
Yeah,
Right?
absolutely.
But we don't need everyone to meet challenge right out of the gate.
Yeah. Oh, well, and the other big thing with BTC is that once those kids are gone, they are gone. You cannot bring them back. So you really have to be intentional about your launch because once they're gone, they're gone.
And then where do we do the launch, Megan?
Well, and this one we can go through pretty fast. We need to be gather, standing, verbal, and for 5 minutes. Gather. This is a picture of me last October with my kindergarten students. Yeah, there's one kid looking up, one kid's got his hand down his pants, and it's all going on. But to be fair, you have to just have them practice it. And
Yeah.
I have so many people who say that kindergarten kids can't do this. We just need to practice it.
Yeah.
We just practice it, and they get better and better every single day.
They do.
But
And I
really,
was in that room when this happened, and they got it, right? Like they have to, our research just shows that if we can get them standing with us, they're more attentive, right? If they're huddled around us, they feel that this is important. They're listening better. I don't think kids listen when they're sitting. I think their ears are vented through their butts. They're not distracted by their stuff. They don't feel anonymous. And varying ages have different degrees of sense of personal space. Like these are what were these, grade 5s,
Yeah.
6s?
These are grade 5s from last year.
Grade 5s, they take up a lot more room than the kindergarten kids, not only because they're bigger, but because they actually have a sense of personal space. Whereas the kindergarten kids, they're on top of each other.
Oh
right?
yeah, every single time.
Yeah.
Without
And on
fail,
top of
yes.
me. I did a class recently. I launched with kindergarten kids. I had my back against a board. There were still 3 kids behind me. That's how close they get.
They get very, very,
Not
very
so much with the grade 10s.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And I guess the other two things is verbal. I know that we really, really want to give people on paper and on words, but if you look at any of the tasks in our book, if you gave them textually, they those kids would have a lot of trouble with it. They are really, really meant to be done verbally, and you have 5 minutes.
And those scripts are there to help you with that.
Exactly. But 5
All right.
minutes.
And part of this scripting, this verbal, is storytelling. Now, we can't always tell a story,
No.
but you'd be surprised how often you can, especially with a K-6 curriculum or K-5 curriculum.
Yeah.
That task we talked about earlier, the next door number task, those aren't just numbers, those are siblings. And these siblings, they come to school every day, and they come before you come to school, and every day they have to line up on the number line and they have to stand next to each other all day at school.
All day, every day.
And then they go home, and then they have to live next to each other in the same configuration in their house because their bedrooms are all lined up. And I got to tell you, these siblings are getting pretty tired of each other, right? 7 thinks that 8 smells, and 5 thinks that 6 chews too loud, and 2 thinks that 3 snores. And they're getting tired of being next to each other.
Yeah.
They know they have to be next to each other when they come to school and get on the number line, but when they're at home, they don't want to be next to each other. Well, good news, their parents just bought a new house, and your job is to help them move into that house.
Which is just adorable. And I will say at least children in kindergarten and grade 1 and grade 2 absolutely love that story.
Yeah.
And what is cool about storytelling is that stories give kids to think, or something to think with, because then instead of trying to pick numbers that are not next to one another, they are picking better rooms, and they talk in those languages, which is really, really cool to see.
Right. Number 1 question when I do that task, does 4 like 5? No, 4 doesn't like 5.
4 hates 5.
And I was back in a school recently where I had been there the year before doing that task, and the kids are like, "Hey, you're the one with the numbers who don't like each other." And
Oh, I love that. And there's also the non-example. And this one is really, really great because I think that sometimes we want to give people a way to solve the like problem, but the best way is to tell them how to not solve the problem.
Yeah.
So the classic example is,
Tax collector, right? Like if you start with 12, it goes badly very quickly. But that's okay. That's where they want to start. That's where we're going to start because this helps them understand what the task is about without telling them how to do the task.
exactly. And that is the same with the carnival conundrum. We have Thane losing, right? He
Yeah.
loses, and then you know how not to solve the task. But also, surprisingly, you do know how to solve it from there without us telling you.
Yeah.
And
And this is one of the things that we actually found in our research too, is that teachers' examples are too good. And when
yeah,
teachers' examples are too good, the kids just copy it. We need to create as often as we can non-examples. Bad examples. Be worse at your examples.
be really, really bad at your examples. Now,
Yeah.
this is my favorite thing because I see teachers do this and myself do this all the time is we like to tell kids things just in case. And it's like right before you are about to send them off, you will have this like I'm itching to tell them everything they need to know about task 25. And
Yeah.
so you go, and then you say like this, and you're like, let me tell you something, let me tell you something. And you need to like tell them everything right before they go.
Yeah.
Don't.
And it's Julie Dixon is the one who coined these terms of just in case versus just in time. And what we tend to do as teachers is we want to, just in case you're going to see one with negative numbers, let me do that one for you. And just in case you see one with a fraction, let me show you one of those. And just in case, and just in case, and just in case. And now we're now 17 and a half minutes into the lesson, and the kids haven't even gotten out to play yet, right? Like we have to stop doing the just in case, and we have to lean more into just in time, which we'll talk about in a little
Yeah,
bit.
exactly. So like let them go, give them just enough to do the first task.
Yeah.
That's all they need. We can figure out the rest later. And this one is like actually something that is quite new to the research, Peter, which is
Yeah.
this idea of community building with like their names.
Right. I call them empathy boosters, right? So the idea of an empathy booster is that kids, like one of the things that starts to happen is that when kids care about each other, collaboration looks very different, right? When students start to care as much about their partner's learning as their own learning, collaboration takes on a whole different feel. And in order to get there, we have to build community because when we build community, empathy is unlocked. And what we have found is that there's two ways that we can really boost empathy. One is kids don't care about each other if they don't know each other's names. So the first thing they have to do when they get to the board is they have to write down their names, except they're not allowed to write their own name. They have to write their partner's name, one of their partner's name, which means they're going to have to turn and ask them, what's your name? And then they write it. And that's what's underneath those blue blocks, right? And I was doing this recently in a grade 6 class, and the teacher like they know each other's names. I go, uh-huh. 4 kids right out of the gate. What's your name? Right? Like they don't know each other's names as well as you think, and then they don't know how to spell it, and so they have to have that conversation. And then after that, we do the this or that, right? Which is so what's your name? Oh, it's Megan. How do you spell that? Oh, A before E. Okay. All right. Good, good, good. And then the this or that. So Megan, do you prefer waffles or pancakes?
Oh, it's waffles.
Waffles. Okay. So
100%.
then they
I
write
goes really.
W and then they pass the marker to the next kid. And what happens here now is within 5 minutes, everybody has touched the marker. Everybody has said something. Everybody's name is on the board and they all know something about each other. It could be a small thing, but these empathy boosters have a tremendous impact on building that culture, that community, and unlocking that empathy. What was a this or that for this one, Megan?
This was headphones or like earbuds. And I will tell you, the kids had so many strong opinions
All
about
right.
this question.
Yeah.
And that is one thing you do have to be aware of is the kids will have strong opinions on every question. But the second thing is that you better be like ready to do this quite a bit because the kids will beg for it every single time. Even last week, 2 weeks ago, a kid I didn't like them give them one, and they made one up, and it was the wildest one ever. Like it said, would you rather never be able to wear socks, or like always have to wear socks outside of your shoes?
Yeah.
That was the like this or that. I was like, that's not even a this or that. That's a wild question.
Yeah, yeah. And you're right. Like the research is kind of showing that 3 weeks is enough to really unlock the empathy, but they do not want you to stop,
No,
right? So you got to have a long list: pie or cake, hockey or football, fall
yeah,
or spring.
yeah,
Do you
something
want,
because
yeah,
they have a lot.
yeah.
It's
Would you
yeah,
rather
it's
have
crazy.
the power of invisibility or the power of flight?
Absolutely. I'm
Yeah.
with you there. All right. So
We
now we
get
get
into the
into the
body now.
body. Into the body. All right. So
So
this
let's come back to this idea of just in case versus just in time. So just in case is what we tend to want to do in the launch. So that's this idea, just in case you see this, just in case you see that. And what we want to do is we want to talk until we've prepared the students to do the last question in the sequence. And we need to stop doing that. And just like Maegan said, we need to just say enough for them to get started on the first task. Then they will learn something on the first task that helps them do the second, which helps them do the third. And if at any point they get stuck, we can push in just in time with some support. Or if they now need a new piece of information that they didn't have at the beginning, we push in and we give it to them just in time. Right. And this is again Julie Dixon's terminology, but this is in very much what differentiation looks like in a thinking classroom, right? It's that just in time. And there's an irony here. Our overwhelming temptation is to do just in case because we think it's if we just preload this stuff, it's going to save us so much time later. And the irony is this: if you do just in case, you're still going to have to do all the just in time support
so
anyway.
true, hey? Yeah, it doesn't even like matter because you'll still be doing both. So you might as well just pick the one like yeah, like that you like have to do. Yeah. And there are some ways to make this like an easier, right? Because it's really, really like, it is very simple for like us to like I'm stand here and then say, oh yeah, like just do like I'm just in time. But then you're like, yeah, but how? When I've got 30 students
Just
in
give
the
them the
class.
next task just in time.
Yeah, just in time.
Yeah.
But yeah,
We have a
so
trick for that.
there is, and that's the banner. And there's really three types of banners. I have two, but there's really a third one within there.
So there's vertical versus horizontal. So what's a vertical banner? So you can see here a vertical banner is if you look at the top of that whiteboard, you see that x plus 16 equals y. That is the task that they are working on. And where did they get this task? They stole it from another group who had that written on their banner. So the banner is just the top 6 inches of the board or so, 15 centimeters. And there are 3 rules associated with the banner. Rule number 1, whatever task you're working on, you put on the banner, right? You do the work below the banner. Rule number 2, when you're done your task, don't wait for me to give you a new one. Look around the room and find another task that someone's working on and steal that one, right? Now, how did they get that one? Well, they stole it from someone else. And where did they get it? They stole it from somewhere else. And where did they get it? Well, I gave it to them. Right. And what this means is I don't have to run around and give the task to every group. I just give it to one group and then it spreads. Right. Rule number 3, never make up your own task and put it on the banner. Because it's going to mess up the thin slice sequence that we're creating. Right? Now that's called a vertical banner. And this is what's actually called a distributed banner. A distributed banner is where they're stealing from each other. You can also have a common banner. A common banner is a great way to introduce students to a banner, or when you're working with very young kids, what we do is we use a banner at the top of the front, the whiteboard, the big whiteboard in the room. Almost everybody has one. So we just draw a banner across the entire top of the room. And the first task goes up on the banner. The kids all steal that one. When a group is ready, I put the second task up next to the first one. When someone's ready for the third one, I add the third one. When someone's ready for the fourth one, I add the fourth one, but I remove the first one. Right? When they're ready for the fifth one, I add the fifth one, but I remove the second one. It's really important that there's only ever 3 visible. That prevents them from being overloaded and overwhelmed. They don't have a sense that this is the last question. And this is true whether you're using distributed or common banner. If there is a group that is way ahead, we will give that task to them personally, but tell them not to put it on the banner. If there's a group that's way behind, we will give that task to them personally, right? But it's that the banner really helps with this, and that's a vertical. And how does it work when we have like the tasks are word problems or lots of images? We use a horizontal banner.
Yeah, so this is what a horizontal banner looks like, and this is actually one of my horizontal banners from before Christmas. So essentially the horizontal banner works the exact same as the vertical banner, except for instead of having three questions, there's just three piles. And then once most groups are done, the first one, I'll take it away and I'll put the fourth one, there. And this is really just a matter of what I call managing the bookends, because these vertical and these horizontal banners tend to deal with the middle groups. Like I would say 90% of your groups will be using those three, but you might have that group that Peter mentioned that's really far ahead, or a group that is really far behind, and you just want to make sure that you are close to those groups in order to give them their next question, specifically for a group that's maybe 2 or 3 slices behind. You want to be able to be there for them, because you don't want them to turn around and look around and then maybe recognize how far behind they actually are. So you want to be close to that group. One thing I will say with a horizontal banner is have a discard pile. So I would make enough for every group and then have a discard pile, because I've done it even with groups in grade 6 and 7. They will still put it in the wrong pile. They will still put it back in the wrong pile. Just have a discard and then that's it.
And you can also, with all of these tasks, you can make that decision, that differentiated decision that, okay, this group is way behind. I'm going to spend more time supporting them with just-in-time support. But I may also decide we're going to skip a task or two here and there, because that helps them catch up. And with support that they can do that, because there was redundancy there. But we can also have these tasks that slow kids down, right? So if there's a group that's way ahead, well, they're getting that one. No one else is getting that one. You're going to have to dig deeper, as Maegan gave earlier. That's going to keep them a little busier while everybody else catches up, because they're ready for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And
the bank is, we're back to this carnival conundrum, this idea that the kids are supposed to make generalizations. But it's really hard to make generalizations unless you can see the pattern. And it's really hard to see the pattern if they keep erasing everything. So the bank is just a way for them to store answers. So what the bank is down one side of the board or the other, they draw these little boxes. And every time they come up with a solution, they put their solution in the box. Sometimes you have to put the question and the solution. This also is true, for example, the target task that we talked about earlier that leads to the chicken nugget problem, right? They need to start to notice the patterns. And in order to notice the patterns, they have to save their solutions. So they're storing their solutions in the boxes going down the left-hand side. And that allows them to eventually start to spot a pattern. They still do the work on the main part of the board. They just store their task and solution down the side when they're done. And it allows you to monitor, but it allows them to have something to look back at to spot patterns. And if they're not spotting the pattern, it allows you and your just-in-time support to push in and draw their attention to certain things in their work. It also allows you to correct their work, because it's really hard to spot a pattern if there's incorrect data.
Yep.
So the bank allows you to do all of those things.
Yeah, absolutely. And the badges, another one that's kind of new and kind of fun is, so there are sometimes when, because many times when we are doing workshops, teachers say that, they do want their students to do multiple representations, which is amazing, and we want that. And so the badges is kind of a way in order to push kids to practice through multiple representations.
So, for example, you may want them to add using a number track. You want them to add using 10 frames. You want them to add using the standard algorithm. You want them to add by drawing counters. Those are 4 different representations that we maybe want them to do. Do we want them to do all 4 every time? Not necessarily, but maybe over the course of the lesson, we want them to have used every representation, because if we let them choose their representation, they lean into their favorite and the other representations wither, right? So the badge system is this idea that, okay, you can use any method you want, but you got to keep score, right? So you used the track method this time, you score under the track method. You used the counter method, you put a score under that, like a little hashtag or a star or something. And by the end of the lesson, they need to have balanced out. You need to have used every representation this close to the same number of times.
Yeah.
Right. You can also force it. I think the next image shows this.
Oh, yeah.
In this sort of, tell us about this one, Megan.
Yeah, so this was a grade 3 class, and we were doing subtraction, and this one's harder to see because at the very bottom, like left, like that says like stack, blocks, number line, draw. And so what you can't see is that behind those students would have been a bunch of like orange 10 frame blocks.
Yeah.
Kind of like these, right? And so like with like this way, then I was telling them they would have to do at least 2 ways for every single question. And so from that they would choose. But the one thing I love about forcing them to kind of do certain like methods is the fact that this makes them choose the best method. Instead of just choosing their favorite, they have to choose the best. So for instance, with this one, we were going to get into the thousands. So a lot of them used their 10 or their like base 10 blocks like earlier, because they knew, oh wait, we want to get rid of these, like, and not get rid of, but they just become cumbersome, right? But that's cool for grade 3 for students to see the cumbersomeness of certain ways of doing things.
And we hear the same conversations where the kids are like, no, let's do this one with 10 frames because the numbers are small and that's easy to draw, right? But let's do number line for the bigger numbers, right? And they start to have these efficiency conversations, which is really important, right? Because part of fluency is efficiency. And one of the ways that you can actually ladder them into that is you can force them to do 2 methods or 3 methods, where you partition the board as you have done here, and you say, you got to do number track, you got to do 10 frame, you got to do counters, like, and then you force them to do all 3 methods, but then they have to put a star on the method they like the best for that task. And then that starts to get them thinking about, well, not every method is the best for every task.
Yeah. Which is cool because that's what we want them to understand.
Yeah.
Like that's huge.
So let's get into the close now.
Yes. So once again, you have to close. It's so important.
And the closing is, and what is the purpose of the closing? The purpose of the closing is this. When the students are working at the whiteboard, it's not all gold, right? Like they're having incomplete thoughts, they're having incorrect thoughts, they're having thoughts, but they haven't been pinned down, right? They're kind of unorganized, unstructured, informal. They're kind of floating out here. And if the bell rings and they walk out of the room with these incorrect, incomplete, or unreified ideas floating out here, they're just going to float away. And what the purpose of the closing is to correct, complete, organize, structure, and formalize their thinking, right? The purpose of the closing is to take all of their good ideas, their meaning-making ideas, and turning it into meaning-making. And there are 3 ways to do that. We can do a consolidation notes or check your understanding questions. You don't have to do all 3. You have to do at least 1. And you have to spend a third of the time of your lesson doing the closing. And I know you're sitting there going, oh, that's a lot of time. Yeah, it is a lot of time. But here's the thing that's important. If you don't spend the time to close the lesson, everything that happened before it was a waste of time. Right? You have to close a lesson, and every lesson needs to be closed. And like I said, there's 3 ways to do it. Consolidation. We're going to have to go quick here.
Oh yeah, so there's 3 types of consolidation. There is conversations, which are really good for some big ideas. There's the teacher scribes, or there's the guided gallery walks.
Yeah.
Like a conversation.
Yeah.
It's
great
just like,
if we're having ideas around like what representation would be good to use and things like that.
or I think about a task like the oddly even task, right? Like, if there's just one big thing you want those kids to come away with, a conversation's great. And you know what? Those kids are pretty comfortable, with it. And like once again, and like this doesn't take a lot of time. You might think about it for a while, but like a conversation. We also have a guided gallery walk.
Right. And the guided gallery walk is best when we have a divergent task, right? So we gave the task and every group did it differently. And now there's a lot of really great thinking out there on different ways to solve the same task. And that's why we do the gallery walk, because it's divergent and we go and look at different ways of solving the same task. But if we have a convergent task,
Well, that's teacher scribe. And this is probably like in terms of like as a classroom teacher for kindergarten and grade 6, 7, like this is your bread and butter. And this is like your 90% of the time you'll be doing teacher scribe. And it's very, very simple. It's just like, okay, like you say, like, hey guys, so I've written 3 questions on the board similar to the ones you guys just did, but I think I might have put them in the wrong order. You turn and talk to your neighbor and discuss what the order should be and why. And that's it.
and when we do that, we, with the 4 to 12s, they all would get it right.
Yeah.
Right. You can trust a kid to put up their hand and they're like, oh yeah, it's got to be this one. And you're like, okay, why? And they'll tell you. K to 2, there's not quite, they're still a little feral. Right. Like you never know what you're going to get. You'll get a kid putting up their hand and going, the top one, because my grandma just turned 89. Right.
Exactly.
Like you just they're not buying what you're laying down here. They're not getting it. So with the K to 2s, we still do it, but we do choral response. We're like, okay, everybody, which one should be first? And they all call out different numbers. And you go, B, right. Let's talk about that. And with the grade 3s, they're kind of in a transition year. They're not quite housebroken yet. So we may start with choral response and then move eventually towards they're sort of trusting that they can put up their hand. But just be aware.
Yeah,
that,
absolutely.
I was watching you, Maegan, do this, and the kids, you never know what you're going to get.
You never know. Well, because the problem is that when you ask them which one is the easiest, they will always pick the hardest question because they want to, they want to seem smart, or they pick their favorite. So you definitely have to do the choral and then pluck whichever one you want.
And then after they've done that, we
got their
wanted
note.
to do some notes to their future forgetful self. And the new note structure that has emerged out of the research is this idea that there's 4 quadrants. Example 1, example 2, example 3. Example 1 is a mild question. They're going to have to fill in the blanks. Example 2 is a medium question, right? But they have to bring their own structure. Example 3 is create your own adventure, and then things to remember. What are the things you want to they know now that you want to remember 3 weeks from now. And this is super important that they do it at the whiteboards in their groups, because this is about note making, not note taking. For the K to 2s with a bit of 3s, we do just the top 2 quadrants. Right. And as you can see here in this structure, you can feel it, like we're helping them to organize, structure, and formalize their thinking. Yeah.
And really, because and I think from the last 15 or so years, oftentimes the notes that I would give to my students are my notes, but we really need to understand that meaningful notes need to be meaningful for the students, not for us. It's always for the students. This is their meaningful notes.
Yeah. And then we get into the check your understanding questions. And what is the most important part here, Maegan?
I would say the most important part here is that they choose where they start and where they want to go, and that there is only 3 groups. But
right. And the headings are super important. That it's mild, medium, spicy. They're fun. It's and like, who doesn't want to be spicy?
Exactly. But also those do not those mild, medium, and spicy, those will be describing the questions, not the students.
Yeah.
We
and we can see this on the next one as well. you know, and we tend to do 3 of each, but we can add more. But if we're going to add more, we add more spicy, right? We don't add another category. They can get spicier, but we don't add more mild, because if they can do the 3 mild, they should go on to medium and so on. And again, we don't have to do all 3 closings, but we have to do at least one. And we can see that in the next diagram. Right. So in many ways, this is what a lesson looks like. And it doesn't matter how much time you have. I see that in one of the questions is how long are these lessons? It doesn't matter. If you have 30 minutes, the launch has got to be lesson 5. The body takes up the rest of that first 2/3, and the closing is 1/3 of the lesson. Right. And the closing can be any combination of those 3 things. If you have 75 minutes, it gives you more time for the body and the closing, but the launch still stays short, and we still have 1/3 of the time for the closing.
And if you're ready to implement, here is your roadmap.
Yeah. And if you want more information, where do they go, Maegan?
There's 3 books and a 4th on the way.
Yeah.
There you go.
And you
Okay, and one of the big questions was, what color will the 4th book be? Because we're all referencing them by color. So
it's sort of a brick red.
Yeah, it's like a maroon, right?
One's going to be red. All right.
Yeah.
So, yes, lots of people have been asking. I showed this at the beginning. I'll show it again here. If you don't have this book, go get it. We had a lot of people asking during the giveaway saying they want this book. So I've decided I'm going to have a few more of just the random sessions throughout this weekend. I will give away this book. It seems to be a popular one. So at ones where we're not doing a giveaway, there might be another giveaway that happens with that book. I'm just going to leave it there. So if you're not connected with Peter and Maegan, make sure you take a screenshot of that or come back, get it when the replay is up. The replay should be up here soon. It is streaming on YouTube, so we should be able to grab that and just put it right into their page. Where the Zoom link was, there will be this video, so you can come back and watch it. So Peter, thank you for fitting us in while you're down at a conference in San Diego. Maegan, thank you for giving up the time today away from family and everything. So we appreciate it very much. And all of you out there, we had at one point I saw over 1,300 of you on here live with us. So thank you so much for giving up part of your Saturday to come learn. And I'm excited for everybody being able to implement these things. I have a page full of notes, the information on the close. I told them at the end too, I was like, I'm not going to rush them on the close because the close is so important. So yeah, you guys could have taken more time. So thank you very
Christina.
much. Yeah, I
And
really
if anyone
appreciate
is
it.
at the CPM conference who is listening to this, come and say hi to me today.
All right, we'll see you guys over at the other sessions. Thank you so much again.
Bye, guys.
Bye, everybody. Have a good rest of the summit.